Welcome to this episode of Founded in Tech. I am your host, Mark Eckerly, and today's show is part of our Tech Tips series, where we have special guest host, Zsia Rosmarin, who is a tax partner here at Withum. She sat down with Lejdi McNair, who is a leader in our state and local tax department, to discuss sales tax. On today's episode, they discuss what factors trigger physical or economic nexus, the ramifications of transitioning to a remote work environment, and much more. This episode had a bunch of great insights from Lejdi and Zsia, and I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Hi everyone, we're here to talk about sales tax and what we're seeing in the market. I'm Zsia Rosmarin, very excited to be here today with my colleague Lejdi McNair, who leads our sales tax practice. Gosh, Lejdi, what a year 2020 has been between COVID, and then you throw on top of that, sales tax and all the new rules. Wayfair came out about, I don't know, even 2.5 years at this point. But we've certainly seen a lot of attention on sales tax. So what are you seeing? What are we seeing from our clients, and what's going on in the marketplace?
Yeah, thanks, Zsia. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. It's definitely been very interesting last couple of years. When Wayfair case passed in June of 2018, I was on maternity leave, came back just because of it. And sure enough, it's been probably our busiest last 2 years. I really didn't expect initially to see so much turnaround and on the compliance side from our client, but it's definitely been interesting. I would say most of our clients totally embraced the Wayfair case and the obligations that came with it. So what we have seen on our end is a lot of economic nexus studies, taxability research. We've seen most recently, due to COVID, the last 6-7 months, a lot of mergers and acquisitions activity. Sales tax has definitely been no longer the stepchild of all taxes. So in priority-wise, we've definitely climbed up. Every time Zsia and I get on our due diligence calls, there are 20 other people on the other side just talking about sales tax. So, super exciting time, not so much for a lot of our clients, because obviously the whole imposition of economic nexus has created a lot of headaches for our clients, right? Because it's not just nexus requirements, there's a lot of things that come with that, which is, registrations, doing taxability research of the product, and obviously compliance, which compliance can be pretty burdensome for our smaller clients.
Yeah, so you kind of threw around some terms that maybe some of our listeners aren't familiar with. This concept of nexus, economic nexus, physical nexus. Can you just explain to us what does that mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, these are all super important terms for sales tax. I love when I get on a call with a couple of my clients or prospects. I know exactly what nexus is, but if you don't know, nexus is actually a connection that a company has with a particular state. And depending on the state and depending on the rules and requirements, a connection is established by having payroll in the state, by having an actual office, employees, 1099ers. Also, due to Wayfair case, nexus is established by having just mere sales into that jurisdiction. So if you're a company that has $100,000 of revenue or a couple of hundred of transaction in a particular state, now you have nexus.
So is it when you talk about revenue in the state, are you talking about, if I ship a good into the state, for example, we have a lot of e-com customers, and I know it's based on, where it's shipped to. That's pretty easy. What if you have a SaaS company or a tech company and everything's in the cloud, and where is it? How do you know where the sale is,
That is one of the hardest things for our clients that are in the SaaS world or digital goods. A lot of our clients sell software subscription to a company that have users all over US, right? So sourcing the sales is probably one of the hardest part for some of our clients, and trying to figure out what portion of the sale goes into a particular jurisdiction and how to quantify it, right? So we generally tell them to use a billing address, just for the easier to have a convenience, unless you have really true understanding where all the users are sitting. And generally, I would say most of our clients don't really know where the users are sitting, so therefore they can't really capture that information. So we'll default back to wherever their customers the billing address and the invoice address is based out of.
Yeah, some of these rules came into effect without really thinking about, tech companies and how you actually find that. So I'm sure this has added a lot of complexity with this new economic nexus concept. One of the other things we're seeing, and we get this question a lot lately, is as a result of COVID, companies now have employees, or as you call them, 1099ers, or as I refer to them as independent contractors. They're all over the country, right? We're
Yep.
getting examples every day. I had somebody, I'm just going to use an example. I had an employee that was, in New York, and now they're in Florida. What does that mean for Nexus? We're not even going to get into payroll, because here
Right.
today we're just focusing on sales tax Nexus.
Right.
And we're seeing this, and we're seeing, I'm there permanently, I'm there temporarily. But what does that mean for the sales tax world when we've got employees now all over the country?
Yeah, I mean, Florida is a great example, Zsia. I have to say a lot of our clients kind of moved to Florida temporarily or permanently. It seems like Florida would be the best state to move to under COVID. I actually debated myself going there. But Florida is a great example because Florida is not a state that has passed economic nexus. So super important for our clients that have already established nexus in every state. And now you have a payroll or a 1099er going into Florida. So that changes the whole dynamic, because despite the economic nexus rules, now you have physical nexus. So you're going to have to start collecting sales tax in the state should what you're selling in the state is subject to sales tax or not. So Florida is definitely a good example. But really, what that means is if you do have even employee that usually, not usually, but would live in New York or live in New Jersey and move to Florida, that means that physical nexus was created, right? And I have to say on my e-commerce client side, Florida is one of those states in Missouri that they're not registered in because both states don't have economic nexus requirements. So super important to focus if you have employees or contractors or 1099ers moving into Florida due to COVID, because it will definitely change your requirements there.
Wow, so we really need to think about employees that may want to stay or they may want to come back, something that maybe companies should look at their HR policies, because like you just said, and just for clarity, you can have either physical nexus or economic nexus.
Right.
Either one of those creates nexus. You certainly don't have to have both. So you
Right.
may have not, had economic nexus in Florida, for example, because they just don't have that concept, but now you have physical nexus there. So certainly lots to consider there as a result of COVID. So if I'm listening to this today, gosh, you said this kind of came into effect 2 years ago. Here we are, it's 2021. I'm a little bit nervous. I have some revenue. I haven't been compliant, maybe. I've been trying to. Maybe I've only been, paying tax. And again, I'm going to use New York as an example. I've only been paying sales tax there. Is it too late for me? Do I need to go back? Am I going to be out of pocket from 2019, 2020? What kind of ideas do you have around getting me compliant, going forward, looking back? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. It's never too late. It's never too late to do the right thing, right? So initially when the Wayfair case passed, some of our clients and just companies in general thought it would go away and it would be appealed and go away. So they were hesitant in the beginning to become compliant, but obviously it's here to stay. Economic nexus will not go away. Most likely the states like Florida, Missouri will pass economic nexus law requirements sometimes in the near future. So it's never too late to do the right thing. Our approach that we take here at Withum is we start with doing an actual nexus study, right? to determine where the company has nexus requirements. And then we look to the next steps, which is depending on what type of products or revenue streams the client has, we look into the taxability of the product. And we also look at the potential exposure. Once we have a good, clear picture of what the potential exposure is, we look into different ways to mitigate that exposure, right? So if, for example, Massachusetts or Washington are a few of the states that we've identified that the company has nexus and potential exposure, we probably will recommend doing a voluntary disclosure agreement to help with abatement and penalties and some interest. If a client of a prospect potentially has nexus but doesn't have taxable sales, that's a different approach that we take, right? Because there is no exposure per se, but maybe there is a filing requirement to report gross sales. If a company has nexus and the potential exposure is pretty insignificant, pretty small, then we discuss with our client the approach of potentially registering in that state going forward, right? So there are a lot of different ways that we can approach and provide solutions for our clients. But what we have noticed is, especially because of COVID and a lot of the due diligence that mergers and acquisitions that are going on right now, a lot of the work that we did with our clients a couple of years ago, right? It's definitely been so helpful with our current clients as they go through due diligence process. So super important to at least start thinking, if you haven't yet, about the nexus requirements, even if you started with the nexus study, to give you a clear understanding where you stand of potential exposure, right? And what that number potentially is. So you can plan internally in regards to the next steps. You know, another big part of this exercise is looking not only the products, but identifying your customers and knowing who your customers are. In a sense, do you sell to exempt customers? And perhaps the solution is to require exemption certificate or to have an exemption certificate process in place, right? Another part of this exercise also is that we, need to consider, have there been any changes of law in regards to taxability? That's also a big part of the exercise. We have a handful of clients that sell food items and products online, and the taxability of those products changes variably in the states. So super important to kind of look through all in these little details that doesn't really mean much if you're not in the sales tax world, but it's important to identify exposure, a potential sales tax exposure.
Yeah, and you brought up things like, it would seem to me that first things first, we identify if the company has nexus. Step 2, if the company has nexus, what were the sales into the state? Step 3, were those sales taxable? And like you said, some of our clients are D2C, direct to consumer. Some of our clients are B2B, so they may not have to, like you just said. So it may not, so the picture gets deeper. We dig deeper and deeper and unpeel each of those layers to really determine taxability there, which is great. One of the questions we do get a lot is, I'm an e-com company. I sell my product on Amazon. Is Amazon taking care of the sales taxes for me, so I'm good? I'm okay? Right. Or what are you seeing in that regard?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Zsia. So when we do the Nexus study, part of our review also is identifying the different types of channels, right, of how sales are made. So if a client or a prospect sells through Amazon, and we have a lot of our clients in the e-commerce space where they do sell through their online platform, but also they sell through eBay or Amazon. And the question is, what do I do with the sales? Are these sales taxable to me? And, the answer is most likely not. Why? Because Amazon and eBay and the marketplace facilitators are required in most jurisdictions to collect the sales tax and remit it on your behalf. So what I tell my clients is, to be sure that that's happening, make sure that you get a report from Amazon and eBay. They're supposed to give their companies a report every month to show the sales tax that was collected and where it was collected. So, that's a way to know for sure. And, obviously Amazon has a full dedicated sales tax team. So you sure would hope they're doing things correctly, but just to give our clients a sense of ease, they should get this report from their marketplace facilitators. However, and you know, marketplace facilitators really was put in place for the reason of companies like eBay and Amazon, because the states wanted to make sure that sales tax was being collected on these sales that were flowing through their platform, right? However, marketplace facilitator rules is creating a lot of headaches for the small companies that are providing this service, because not only they have to be compliant on their sales, but also now they have to start collecting sales tax and remitting on the marketplace facilitator sales. So in the way that it works system-wise, they have to be captured separately, independently in the sales tax software. So it's definitely created a lot of headaches for our smaller client, non-Amazon, non-eBay clients to be compliant.
Yeah, so this has been, super helpful. I know we've only actually even just touched on the surface, but if somebody wants to reach out, they can certainly go to withum.com for more information. Lejdi, just high level, what services, what specifically can we do to help? Can we help with registrations? Do we do sales tax compliance, so forth? Give us a high level overview of what your team actually does.
Yeah, we can do everything when it comes to sales tax. So what I like to, or what I pride myself or my team to do, is we take the process from the beginning to the end. And what I mean by that is we start with the nexus study, with a taxability review, with a potential exposure analysis, BDAs, registrations, and we also help with implementing software tools to capture the taxability, like Avalara TaxStar, and to make sure that companies are compliant and they start, function on their own. We go from talking to our clients every day, and then once we get them set up and completely, fully close the cycle, they do pretty well managing and maintaining sales tax after that.
Wow. Fantastic. It's certainly been great catching up today. Looking forward to more to come on the sales tax horizon. If anyone has any questions, again, I'm Zsia Rosmarin. That was Lejdi McNair, and you can visit us on withum.com, and we have a SALT, which is state and local tax, landing page. Wonderful speaking to everyone today.
Thank you for tuning in. If you liked it and want to hear more, you can follow us and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Founded in Tech.